Well, friends on YouTube, friends out there in the Geekverse, fellow geekologists, you know that tune, you know that sound, you perhaps know these faces. Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. Boom, you hear it? Yeah, I hear a sound of thunder. What is time? Is time real? Well, strap in, friends, because tonight you're going to find out. Without a doubt, we'll have a definitive answer, because what do you get when you have a scientist and two ministers walk into a bar or hop on a podcast? Well, you talk about time and space-time and Einstein's theory of general relativity. And that's what we're going to do today. Hey, friends. Yeah, today this is a part of our faith and science episode and series. And yeah, you heard that conjunction right. There's not an or there. There's an and. We on this call, most of the people on our Systematic Geekology, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I will speak for those who are here on this podcast and live on YouTube, that we are both of the belief that faith and science can hang out together in the same room and not feel threatened, and have great, healthy conversations around the nature of the universe and how they can work together to help us go deeper into how we understand ourselves and the world and the God that created it. So that's what we're going to do today. And the specific topic we're going to talk about is time. Joshua Noel, one of our fearless leaders here at Systematic Geekology, doesn't believe time is real. And so, man, we're going to chime in on that and either prove them wrong or right in this episode. So, yeah, thanks, everybody. I want to welcome my co-hosts, Justin and Andy. Here we are. I'm so glad that you're part of this episode with me. I couldn't think of anybody that I would rather have on this particular episode. And let's share a little bit about what we're geeking out on these days. Andy, we'll go with you. What have you been geeking out today, yesterday, in the last couple of weeks or months? What are you geeking out on?
So I checked out the film The Gorge on Apple TV Plus, starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy.
I like her.
It came out on Valentine's Day, and man, it did it read like somebody sat down and thought, how do we make a movie that both the guys and the gals will want to sit down and watch together on Valentine's Day? Because it has a very straightforward, you know, madly in love kind of love story, and also shooting and monsters and scary bits for the other folks. And so, yeah, it's directed by Scott Derrickson, but it's a PG-13 movie, so it's horror-y, but not super scary or gory or anything like that. It's more kind of an action movie, but with horror elements. Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, charismatic movie stars. Hard not to like them. Hard not to like spending time with them or seeing them spend time with each other. Not a great film, but certainly kind of fun and I had a good time watching it. I can't imagine that it's going to be an all-time classic, but there were worse ways to spend a Valentine's Day evening.
So you're saying this movie was created by Mad Libs or AI generated? Which one? They just threw some prompts in there and see what happened. Is that kind of your hot take?
No, I think the actual film, people put some time and thought into it, but the premise,
Nice.
It very much has the feel of like, what if we mix A and B? Like, how do we combine these two things? We want both a love story for Valentine's Day, but also an action movie for action movie folks.
Nice.
And this, so it's more like the actual human writers were given a prompt rather than an AI was given a prompt. I would say there was more art to it than just that it was AI generated, but it felt very contrived in its or that somebody with a spreadsheet was the one who came up with the initial pitch or the initial request.
Well, I definitely saw the preview for it watching Severance. That's one of the things I'm geeking out on. I'm loving Severance. I'm loving season two. It is appointment television on Friday nights with our family, and so I'm definitely they're definitely throwing that trailer up there as an ad because they know how popular Severance is to lure people to go watch it. And I said, "Huh, that looks interesting." And I'll also share what I'm geeking out on is I am a huge Saturday Night Live fan. I've said it on other podcasts and with you guys, and I loved that 50th anniversary special the other night. 3 hours of Saturday Night Live with a lot of nostalgia and skits and people and celebrities that I've loved over the years. And Saturday Night Live really helped curate and shape my sense of humor for better or worse. And so I loved it. So I'm really geeking out on that, and I can't wait for 50 more years. I have on my bucket list to go attend Saturday Night Live in person at some point. I would love to do that, and we'll see if that's possible at some point. Justin, buddy, what are you geeking out on?
Well, I'd add a second to the SNL 50. I loved it as well, and I've been spending more time trying to watch comedy. That's actually one of my only New Year's resolution is to see more live comedy, and so that was just so good. Also, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man.
So good.
Uh, and yeah, it has been good. It's better than I expected. I am really locked in to Miles Morales in the animated film. So I was not very ready to embrace any other version of an animated Spider-Man. But it was really.
Nice. Yeah, I'm loving the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 2. A few episodes. How many episodes did they say it was going to be? Is it 10? Is it just 10? Are they all out, or there's more out next week? I saw 10 episodes up there.
Yeah, 10 are up there. I'm not sure if there are going to be any more. It feels like at around 10, that is a wrap of the season, but I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I watched episode 10 this morning, and it sure felt like that was signing off for the time being.
I got 2 more to watch, and I will do that this evening on the darkness of night when everyone else is in bed because nobody else cares. And
Oh,
family. Yeah. Friends. Well, we up to freeze up a little bit.
I don't know if it's me or anybody else, but Will, for me, is stuttering and kind of frozen.
yes. Everything was frozen for me a moment ago, but now I'm back and I can hear you.
Okay.
Of my episode problems. Let's do it.
Let's give it just a moment and let Will resync here in a minute. I think he's going to go out and come back in.
Sounds good. Maybe he's time traveling.
Yeah, that's right.
That'll mess with your recording equipment every time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, especially if you're in the TARDIS, because it's always something a little bit wonky every time.
Yep, and they want to make sure the powers that be want to make sure that no recordings come back from the past or the future. Right? We can't mess with the sacred timeline. Can't know too much about our destiny. All that good stuff.
That's right. We do not want to mess with any sacred timelines, which, I mean, it is an interesting point to talk about just in general, this idea that that in the Marvel universe, at least, there is this sense that the timeline has a sacredness to it, even in a way that moves beyond any other religious expressions in there.
Hey guys, I'm back. We're talking
Hey.
about time, and I got frozen in time, and I don't know what you guys are talking about. Sorry. There's the risk of going live on YouTube in a house with spotty Wi-Fi. So yeah, I'm gonna trust that you guys would just kept rolling.
We did
were
a bit,
just-
but help get us back on track.
All right, good. So as I frozen time, and as we just talked about what we're geeking out on, we do encourage everyone on YouTube and on all the socials to like, share, review the show. We are up to 150 subscribers on YouTube. It's not that hard just to hit subscribe or hit like, and we promise that if one of these videos, not this one, or it could be this one, other videos get at least 50 likes, I'll frolic somewhere in the world and videotape it, maybe in a bathing suit, maybe in the snow, maybe in the ocean, maybe among flowers. I don't know. It depends on when we get 50 likes. I promise that will happen. So we got to figure out how to do that. If 150 subscribers, only a third of you can like this thing, and that'll happen. So that is what we're doing. And yeah, we're talking about and science and time, and I keep shorting out here in this thing. I tell you what, time is not on our side, guys. We're trying super hard to make this happen. Oh my gosh. I may run back and open that door back there. You guys. So, all right, here we go. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take me off. And Andy, when we ask, is time real? First of all, Justin, you're going to answer that question, definitive yes or no. Then Andy, you're going to answer yes or no. And then Andy's going to share in just a few minutes Einstein's theory of relativity and how that relates to space-time. Go.
Yeah. Ooh, is time real? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I do think that time is real. It's a part of reality. We can talk about how it functions as a part of reality, and we might even get into some questions about what reality is. But I believe in the way that we usually talk about it, that time is real. Annie, what you got?
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint anyone who was hoping for a fight, but I'm going to also agree time is real. There may be some ontological sense in which, there's some other category of reality or something, beyond what we experience. But, for our purposes, what's real, pertains to to our shared experiences, right? And time is a central aspect of our shared objective reality. And so, yes, there's all kinds of philosophy. There's all sorts of routes that one can go down, but I tend to be a little bit more pragmatic. And yeah, time is real. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't.
That's right. Here's our friend Joshua, who really, he's going to stick a flag in this territory of time isn't real via Kant, and his experience of time is real via however you pronounce that philosopher's name. But I'll say that, you can get metaphysical and spiritual and talk about time as God inside. Now we'll talk more about that, God inside, outside of time, and it's all along the stream and how I'm experiencing it. But I think time is something that's a part of our universe, and even if it's relative, even if it is relative to space and matter and gravitational pulls and the curvature of the universe and all those things. I watched Interstellar. I kind of get what happens when it comes to those things, but I'll have to say it's real because that's what I'm experiencing here on Earth, and that's my reality that I'm experiencing. So I'll say time is real, and disagree with Joshua. We know that he's, he claims to label Joshua with the bad opinions, even though he's backed up by some really top-notch philosophers, and he can chime in on this another time. Andy, so if we're going to talk, it's hard to talk about time without talking about physics and science, and you're a scientist. Justin and I are both ministers who approve of mainstream science and believe in mainstream science and are all ears when it comes to listening to the experts around science. How would you explain for us lay people, Einstein's that's not your area of science, I know, but in terms of like Einstein's theory of relativity and how he changed the game in physics and how that relates to how we experience time or the universe experience time.
Sure. So I'll do my best. So, for a long time before Einstein,
Yeah.
it was understood or perhaps just assumed that time and space were absolutes. They were just sort of the coordinate systems by which we measured our lives. Right? We know where stuff is using the dimensions of space. We know when stuff is using the dimension of time. We measure that with our clocks, with our watches, with our burning candles, with our wet ropes or something like that. All kind of our sundials, all sorts of different devices. But time is that thing which we measure by the ticking of clocks and so forth. And that an interval, 1 second interval of time is the same here, there, everywhere, in the past, the future, the distant galaxies. Not that they really had a concept of distant galaxies, but anywhere in the cosmos, a second was a second was a second. By the time Einstein came along, there was reason to think that the speed of light was constant. So if time and space are constant, are the constants, then the speed of light is relative, just like all other speeds are relative, right? So we've all had that experience, most of us have had that experience, on a highway or something, right? You're going at 60 miles an hour. There's a car next to you that's going 70 miles an hour. It looks to you like it isn't, going that fast. It looks to you like it's going 10 miles an hour, right? So its speed, your measurement of its speed is relative to your own speed. So you would measure it going at 10 miles an hour, which is why the cops sit on the side of the road with their radar guns instead of driving along, because then they would be getting relative, they wouldn't get the measurement that they're looking for. Right. So, but by Einstein's time, we had reason to think that the speed of light did not work that way. That if you were on a spaceship traveling at a very fast speed and you flicked on your headlights, the light beam going out ahead of your spaceship would be measured at going the exact same speed as if you were standing on the side of the space road, right? That everybody would measure the speed of light the same. In order for that to be the case, our experience of time and space then have to be relative to our motion. And so he introduced in his theory of special relativity this concept of time dilation as a consequence of speed. So the people traveling at different speeds will measure the ticking of clocks differently. And so if I'm going really fast and you're not going fast at all, time will go more slowly for me. And when we sync up our watches later, they won't be at exactly the same time. Mine will tick a little bit slower and I'll be behind you. There are caveats there about acceleration matters. And so, the equations are all about speed without acceleration, and acceleration complicates these things. But to a first approximation, right, if I go really fast and you stay still, my watch will show an earlier time than yours does. General relativity expands on that by saying that gravity also matters, right? The experience of a gravitational field also impacts space and time. By curving space and time, that is what we experience as gravity. As the pull towards the Earth is really just because the space around the Earth is curved such that the most natural path is to fall down towards the Earth. But it also has an impact on time as well. And so and we've validated these things a number of ways, but the most practical validation is that the GPS in your phone that we all carry around would not work as well if the satellites were not correcting for the fact both that they are at a different place in the gravitational field of the Earth, and so the gravitational time dilation matters, and they're traveling at a very different speed than we are, and so the time dilation of their speed matters. Because they are trying to measure time, because of the measurement of time for GPS has to be very, very precise, and so those microseconds of difference actually matter. And we would notice if if we put in all those corrections in place for the GPS software to work, and general relativity and special relativity weren't actually accurate. So that's kind of our best kind of everyday practical validation of these things. The other thing that it means is that simultaneity is relative. My notion of which events happen at the same time is different than yours if we're traveling at different speeds, or if we're in different gravitational fields, and so the only thing that's preserved is cause and effect, right? So if one event is the cause of another event, then those two events will always be in the same sequence to all observers. But other events that are not connected by that causal relationship may not always be in the same sequence in the observation of different people in different traveling at different speeds or in different gravitational frames. And that was longer than 2 minutes, but that's my best short version of what relativity tells us
well.
about time.
I like the idea that that our matter matters, that everything that has mass has some kind of effect on the other one, in terms of gravitational pull. I think is a huge understanding in terms of physics and how the universe works. And so what I hear saying is that time is real, but it can be relative to the mass and curvature of the universe and how it relates to the other one another or other things that are in the universe itself. And again, we're not talking about like ethical relativism of like, oh, whatever works for you works for me, man, whatever. We're not saying that, but we're saying that how the universe operates in terms of mass, gravity, curvature, space-time, that how time is measured or measurable is dependent or reflective of how it's relating to something else. Is that kind of a good snapshot there, Andy?
Yeah, sounds pretty good. Yeah, it's real in the sense that there are things that happen before other things, because and that cause and effect are real, right? There are things that cause other things, and that means that there has to be a sequence. But that doesn't mean that time is fixed and constant and universally so, and neither is space. And there are lots of other things that are not fixed and constant through all of the cosmos that we nevertheless regard as real. So I don't see why that would mean that time and space themselves aren't real either.
Yeah. Justin, anything in the conversation or what Andy said kind of sparked curiosity or amazement or awe and wonder? Because that usually happens when it comes to science and going deeper with those things. Anything spark there for you?
Well, it leads to a connected set of ideas that I think we'll talk about as this episode unfolds. But one thing to say succinctly is the reminder that everything connects and everything is related to one another, any other thing. And so I just love this idea of time as a big web. Some might even say timey-wimey web, but it's a web of mutuality and connection. I love that.
Yeah, I like that too. And part of like kind of, so that, there are equations in math, and Einstein was a game changer in terms of his equations, what he was trying to prove, and leading up with science and how we understand the universe. But there's these two Greek words in terms of how we understand time. Chronos meaning measurable time, minutes, hours, weeks, months, years, those kind of things, linear aspect of time. And then kairos is a more of a spiritual understanding or metaphysical understanding of time when it comes to an opportune time, or something happens at the right moment, or someone would say even a God moment within breaking into or a part of chronos time. And us, there's even like long spiritual retreats called kairos retreats out there in the world, because you're taking you're being intentional with your time to sit down and reflect on the big ideas and theological things around God, neighbor, love, all that stuff. So, in your circles, in your spiritual communities, fellas, in terms of Chronos and Kairos, these are two ways that I guess there's two words for time. In English, we just have time, and we got to figure out how to talk about. But Greek was intentional in separating two understandings of what time is about, which Greek often does. How do you guys relate to these two words, or heard it used out there in the world?
And my experience of it is probably similar to yours, Will. I mean, Kairos retreats are something that churches that I've been a part of have done here and there. And I love this idea of Kairos time as being this qualitative understanding of time, where we think about what the right thing that happens in opportune moments. It is when you think about Chronos and Kairos. Kairos is about significance over sequence. Chronos time is about sequence, and I love this idea of Kairos time, that it's about significance, the experiential nature of moments in time, and the gravity, if you will, that they have in the midst of time. And so I have enjoyed conversations about that as it's come up in faith communities that I have been a part of. Significance over sequence.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll actually say I don't know that I've been in a context where the concept of Kairos time has been brought up in that on those terms. I don't think I've heard of a Kairos retreat, but certainly the idea that things happen in the fullness of time and in God's timing, that we sometimes need to set aside our calendars and our schedules and our planned Chronos time so that we can enjoy or be a part of what God is doing on His timeline. Those are sort of more informal ideas that I've definitely come across and had people reflect on or encourage and so forth. But I don't know that I've encountered quite such a systematic handling of the concept.
Yeah. I respect that. And that's legit. The understand when we ask the question, a big question that people ask, what is time? How is it relative to me? Is it real or not? All that kind of, those big questions. And then there's scientific, ways to relate and to dissect and understand it. And then there are like ways to think about the philosophical and theological understandings of time in relation to me and perhaps the moral arc behind the universe or God behind the universe and how that relates to me. And we like to think of time having a purpose leading somewhere, and that if there is a loving God behind all this, then there's a benevolence to the purpose of time and where God breaks in to be a part of those things. So that's just kind of natural to think about. And again, asking this kind of faith and science, we can write all the equations or mathematical proofs for time and space time and how it relates to me and our Earth, our world, and black holes. But then as humans whose brains are wired to make meaning of things, it's only natural for us to think about, well, then how does God relate to that? And then how do I relate outside of time if God is outside or inside of time? And so I guess part of the question now is like, all right, we have Chronos, Kairos. Where do we see God fitting in? Is God outside of time? Did God create time? Is God entangled with time, as some of our process friends and theologians and philosophers would think about, that God is inseparable from time? But the classic understanding of theism is God is outside of it and just perceived it from afar. How do we kind of wrestle with the either or both and of how God relates to time? It's a huge question. We could be here all night. Just talk about. But I think it's hard to not ask that question when we're talking about Chronos and Kairos, and how time relates to that. So, how do you perceive God being connected to, entangled with, or outside of?
It's a great question because it's as so many questions and answers go related to faith in this way, the nature of God in this way. It is not as if I can say, okay, Colossians chapter 2 is all about this. um,
Right.
let's look at the book of Amos. And in the midst of all the prophetic words, there's this exposition about God in time. It's not like you find this. And so there is a bit of speculative theology that is a part of all of this, I think. But what seems to be there is a sense that God functions in time differently. We have enough indication of that in Scripture to say, well, God is functioning somehow differently in time. God is viewing time differently than we do. And so this idea that God is God intertwined with time, or is God set apart? I bristle a bit personally as a theologian, bristle a bit at any notion of God who is distant from anything related to God's creation. That's not how I see the nature of God when I look at the whole of Scripture. And so, but as if God is viewing time or experiencing time differently than us, sometimes there's this notion espoused, and I kind of can get down with it, that God and God's self can be is experiencing all parts of time. If God exists outside of a chronological experience of time, then God is existing in a non-chronological, and so therefore may be able to experience all parts of time at once. This is a really interesting notion because it also can account for God's perspective around what will happen. Say, look, I can guarantee you there's going to be a new creation. Okay. God may be able to see that in a way that we think is some kind of foretelling. Why? Because God sees it as something that is. So anyway, God experiencing time and viewing time differently than we do.
Yeah, those are good words. I like those reflections, and it's not a definitive answer, but as a Lutheran who really leans into both and talk, I mean, I think the cop out is just it's a mystery, but I think there's an element in Scripture where it's a both and of God is both outside of it and perceives and experiences time differently, and yet also entangled with it, that God refuses to be God without us and without time and without the universe, and that those are intimately connected with one another. So that's kind of where I am. You see both in Scripture, and you can hold the tension between the two, and they can hang out in the same room together and have a beer or coffee and chat about the mysteries of time. And we haven't even gotten into string theory yet. We'll save that for another time. But Andy, where are you on that in terms of where God is? If you would be so bold to share with us how God experiences time.
Sure. Yeah, I got it all figured out. No, I hear a lot of, I resonate a lot with what both of you guys have said. For me, kind of the two things that I keep coming back to is one, a Trinitarian God is in some sense, fundamentally relational. And I don't quite know how to understand a relational being without some concept of time, right? Those relationships are unfolding in some sort of time-like fashion. Maybe that's a limitation of my understanding, right? And that's certainly within when we're talking about God and what God's experience is like. That's definitely on the table. But that's kind of one sticking point for me, is that it seems like there must be something there that has a time-like feature to it. It may be a very different dimension of time than the one that is part of our space-time, right? It may be multiple dimensions of time, right? There's all kinds of things that we could imagine, right? That God isn't limited by the 3+1 dimensions of our space-time that we observe, but that there's something there where there is some sequencing of events such that this happens before that, or this allows this to become that, right? That makes a relationship possible. And then the other thing is, as Christians, we believe that God entered into the world, as the person of Jesus, right? And so God experienced time in that way. What that meant and what that means and what that will mean for God's experience of time before and after that event, and whether before and after have meaning in God, in relation to God's experience, right, are valid open questions. But there is a very real sense in which God became entangled with our timeline, our space time, in a meaningful way. And so there is an aspect of God which has experienced time, right? I think is a way of as we do, that I think we can't set aside either. But yeah, both of those kind of touch points will still leave a lot of room for there may be things I don't get, or I don't know, or I don't understand.
And maybe we'll never understand. Maybe we'll be privy to that at some point on the eternal timeline of the divine drama. But I think, this idea of the incarnation of God experiencing time through flesh and bone, I think is pretty important, or at least a linchpin in terms of how we understand God and the triune God. And then there is a drinking game out there of, in my sermons too, how many times I say entanglement, and in my sermons and daily life of talking about the world. But I think, I like this idea that our action, even though time, God sees the whole big picture of all of time, that what we do now still matters, and the choices we make matter, and has an effect on the sacred timeline, if we're going to use MCU language and Tom Varian authority, the sacred timeline that we're a part of, that what we do now affects the whole timeline, forwards and backwards, and God takes that all into God's self in the incarnation of the Christ, and I think that matters when we talk about the science of it all, but also how we understand the moral arc to the universe and the divine. So that's super fun. Oh, we got to lean into. All right, so guys, I learned a new word today, and I love it. As I was looking up stuff, chronokinesis. Oh man, that is time manipulation. There are definitely superheroes out there that can manipulate time, whether speed it up, slow it down, time travel. But chronokinesis was a word used to describe that I love, that I'm like, man, I want that superpower. But in terms of time in our fandoms, of course, there's the time travel movies of Back to the Future and Interstellar that we alluded to before. But in terms of, we have a Doctor Who fan here, where does time show up in our fandoms? And then it's always that great kind of mental, spiritual exercise of reflecting on, if I could go back in time, or if I could control time, if I could go forward or backward. It's there in our storytelling and making meaning. What are some of your favorite places that time travel or the theory of time or science of time shows up in our fandoms? Justin, I'll let you go first, since you put timey-wimey next to it.
Well, yeah, timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly ball, as the David Tennant iteration of the Doctor calls time, or describes time, as someone is asking about it. Well, I love Doctor Who, and other of my fandoms experience time travel, like in Star Trek and such. But I love Doctor Who, going back to this conversation about Kairos and Chronos time. So in Doctor Who, because there's this time machine that moves back and forth in time, it is not bound by the sequential but the whole story is about significance over sequence. I used that phrase before, and so it's focused around the experiential nature of time and how these significant moments can affect time. And so I love the show because it moves outside of that fixed linear progression that we sometimes think about related to time. Now, that said, in Doctor Who, you have things like fixed moments in time, in which the Doctor can't change. That has
Canon
some
events.
Echoes.
Canon events. Is that what
That's
saying?
right. Canon events, things like that. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this sense that these are things to toggle back and forth and use language of faith. There are certain moments in time that are indeed predestined. And so some events are predestined, and then other events are absolutely fluid and are subject to our free will. So I love the way that Doctor Who plays with all of that in the story. Again, it's like the deeply personal and experiential, affecting so much, even though they're at times these fixed moments in time.
Yeah. And then kind of building off that with a little bit, I'll bring up the Time Variant Authority and the TVA, Loki series, sacred timelines, variants, and how to keep things in line with the sacred timeline. I mean, all that exploration and conversation around what could happen or mistakes that happened to correct the mistakes that did happen. All that stuff is just determines human beings who experience linear timeline that wish they could go back and change some things or do things differently and think about what I want for myself and others, my loved ones, for the future. I think all ties into that kind of the TVA, the Time Variant Authority. Isn't there authority out there kind of dictating it, or guiding it or curating it? I don't know. I just love how the Loki series lean into that. And there is even a Marvel comic right now, the TVA, that's been pretty fun because the multiverse has always been a part of comics and kind of sci-fi, and it's definitely leaning heavy into that in different directions. But yeah, for me, the TVA, the Loki series, thinking about time is very special to me and very informative. Andy, how about you?
Well, if I could interject for just a moment.
Absolutely.
So the Time Variant Authority is kind of a version of the Time Lords in Doctor Who. I mean, you have to. There are these people or this group of people that see it as their responsibility to protect time from all of these challenges. I mean, in Doctor Who, it's all these paradoxes and things like that can emerge. It is a bit fun in Doctor Who that you get paradoxes like the bootstrap paradox and the grandfather paradox, things like that the show tries to talk about a bit and just plays around with some actual theory around time and paradox. So I love the show again for some of that. But Andy, you got some.
Yeah, go for it, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my X-Men background here, right? So, time travel and manipulation of time has always been a big part of the X-Men. One of the classic stories is the Days of Future Past, and that, the idea of, time travel as warning, as, this is what not to do, that we get from, the Terminator movies as well and other things, is an interesting wrinkle on that. I loved Bill and Ted growing up, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I still think that's one of the most creative, like, thinking through how does this actually work, and that that these guys are just like, oh, well, we'll just come back. We have a time machine. We'll just come back later and put Dad's keys here, and then we'll be able, we'll be all set. And then they go and there are Dad's keys. Like, yes, that is how that makes a lot of sense. Yes, of course, it's nonsense time travel, but this so many time travel stories, movies, and so especially movies, because movies are all about, right, the elapsing of time, right. That's kind of the fundamental feature of cinema. So many movies and TV shows fall into that trap of like, while I'm in the future or I'm in the past, time is elapsing in where I left at the same rate, and it's like, no, you can go back and be where in that exact same moment. That's the premise that you've set up. That's the conceit here. If we're gonna go with that, to go with that. And so I appreciate the creativity there. And actually one of the most impactful time related things for me was in Avengers Endgame. It's not really a time travel thing. It's just time. But when we see the first sequences, and they kind of deal with the aftermath of Infinity War, and they get Tony Stark back and all that, and they try to get the time stone and fix things or whatever, and you realize they can't, and we get that time jump, and the number 5 comes up on the screen, and then years later, and man, I was floored. That was such a bold move, I thought, to because it very nicely solves the problem of, well, we know that those people aren't going to stay dead because they're valuable movie stars to this franchise, but how do you bring them back in a way that doesn't completely erase the impact of what happened in the last film? And that was such an elegant solution to that. Of time has passed, and that matters, and it has left a mark on all of these people. And even though what follows is some time travel shenanigans that perhaps undermine that a little bit, that why couldn't they have just gone back and undone things? And I'm sure there's a line somewhere about why they couldn't, but or and I'm not entirely sure that all the fixation in the shows and movies afterwards on the 5-year blip and how does the world work. I don't think they quite solved all those problems of
Right.
we don't want to think too much about the logistics of what you did there. But yeah, in that moment, when those words came up on the screen, that was just a really impactful moment of reflection on, okay, this has consequence, and there's no going back here. An indelible mark has been left on the world.
Right.
And I like how, like, even in that movie, they know they're doing some time travel stuff, and they allude to other movies in ways that we know in pop culture, whether it's Back to the Future or other places. That's not how it works. Well, I've always assumed this is how time travel works. Like, no, there's actually, they try to tie in a little bit of science, but, it's hard to do a time travel story without thinking about that's become before you in terms of what you affect or not and some of the big pop culture things. So, and that's a great segue. That's a great segue to our next question. Guys, is time travel possible, and where would you go if you could travel in time? One of my wife is of the mind that she shared before, these UAPs we see that we think are UFOs that we renamed UAPs. She's like, what if it's us from a different timeline peeking in? What if it's us that they understand quantum physics in a way that they can kind of wormhole their way to spy and look how things go, so they can do things a little differently in the future or past? And I'm like, that's not a bad theory of these UAPs. It might not be aliens, but it could just be us who figured out something about time travel. So what have you guys? What do you think? I love the dramatic pause. It's so good.
Yeah. While Justin is gathering his thoughts, one of the things that we take away from general relativity is that there are ways to solve the equations of space-time such that you get where time-like curves that allow you to move backward and forward in time. The way that you have to do that, right, involves some pretty exotic things that it's not clear that we can in practice construct, but it does seem to be an allowed feature of space-time as described by general relativity, which is our best description that we have available so far. And that kind of sparks a lot of the fascination, a lot of enthusiasm for current time travel and time travel stories. It seems possible in principle, although perhaps impractical, and probably what's more likely is that you can send information back in time rather than sending your physical matter back in time.
Huh.
And actually, there's a cool movie called Frequency that that explores that idea. So a father and son are able to communicate with each other across like a 30-year time gap via shortwave radio. That not not much explanation is offered, but somehow this shortwave radio is connecting across time, and that allows the son to speak to his father who died
Nice.
in a tragic accident in the intervening years. And they explore some pretty cool things with that. So that's a fun movie if you're interested in that kind of aspect of what if it's only information that can travel instead of matter.
Awesome.
My dramatic pause was around how we already experience some sense of travel in time. It's our inclination as human beings, at least, to do so. So my answer would be, I hope that time travel is possible and becomes and it delights me to think about a time when it is more possible for us to do so with greater clarity. I was thinking about a passage that I had to look up here from Ecclesiastes 3 that says, God has made everything fitting in its time, but has also placed eternity in their hearts without enabling them to discover what God has done from beginning to end. And I mean, it's just, a little bit of a convoluted verse there in the English, but what the verse gives me the sense of is that as we are beings created in God's image, and that God is a being who, as we said toward the beginning of our time together, exists connecting with time and sometimes standing outside of time. God, that in us is this innate desire to think and see and function in ways that mimic how God does in a more vast way. So when I say we already experience some bit of time travel, this is how our thinking works. Like we are always anchored
Yeah.
in the past in certain ways. Like there are these memories that affect us positively and negatively in the present. So, and we're hearkening back to those all the time to understand the present moment. And we are also beings that cannot help but to think about the future in multiple configurations. And so we are, in a way, we're always attempting time travel in our minds.
I love that take. I
and
love it. Just yes.
and so so anyway, I mean, it just
Yeah.
I like the notion that this may be at some point possible for us to do with greater clarity.
I love that idea that our minds allow us to, like, my dog, I don't know, like back when he was around, when he existed in time, it's not that he could, maybe he could reflect, he has memories of the past and he reacts to how he was treating the past, but he's not like reflecting on the past and future and looking at the stars and contemplating to go to Mars in the future or not. Like that's not how his consciousness work, I don't think. But in fact, as humans, we can time travel and we can think about our past and reflect on it and let it go or learn from it, and then be anchored in how it makes our choices in the present that lead us to make future impacts. So all that is a part of how we exist, that we do time travel in our brains and our souls and our spirits and how we react to things. So I love that take. That's good. Andy, you have something there?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a notion in cognitive psychology, or perhaps a related field, that ability to mentally time travel is a big part of what made us human. I said that was a
Yeah.
key component in the development of the mental apparatus that is the human mind, that sets
That's
us apart
cool.
from other creatures,
Yeah.
and that it might have
I
enabled
love
other
that.
things like the development of the social groups and language and things like that.
Oh, that's
Fellow
very cool.
co-host Evan, fellow co-host Evan Garcia says, "I just learned that these quantum computers Google is coming with could tell us if we could time travel or not. Wild." There is a cool series called Devs, DEVS, on FX and Hulu that dealt with quantum computing and time travel back and forth, and to look back into time. And man, I was watching that around the time of the pandemic, and man, that haunted me. I don't know if you guys have seen that show or not, but I thought it was pretty well done.
That has been on my list. That's one of those. I've heard such good things about it that I don't want to be. I don't want to be in the moment where it's in my past. I want to keep it as something to look forward to. But it means I just keep not watching it.
I love it. I love it. Well, if we're going to go to a certain place, if we're going to think about time real quick, we're running out of time here, but I selfishly, I would like to go back to the surf culture of the late 1970s, early 80s with how I surf now. And then kind of, I wouldn't be able to hang with the pro surfers today. They're way too good for me. But I think if I take my surfability now and go back to the late 70s, that I would be like a rock star. And just let me grab a board and show what they could do. I would go like, I wouldn't steal like Back to the Future, like a betting book, and make a lot of money off betting on sports. But I would become a pro surfer in the late 70s or later if I can't hold on to my surfability now. And then I would revolutionize how I would like, hey guys, you're surfing on single fin surfboards. I have an idea. Let's put three fin. I would be the one who would invented the 3-fin thruster surfboard, and they'd be like, "What?" Not Simon Anderson. I would beat Simon Anderson to the person who put three fins on a surfboard. I would be the one, and they'd be like, "He revolutionized how you surf." That's what I would do, very selfishly. But I don't know about you guys. Where would you go?
Oh man.
I don't know. Lately, my thoughts have been on the there's a market in China that I'd like to bring a whole bunch of Lysol and some N95s and do a deep cleaning on
Yes,
a few years ago.
Yep. I hear you. Man, don't eat those bats. Don't eat those
Maybe
bats.
maybe some vaccine doses for the animals there.
Yeah. There you go.
I love that.
Using
You
your
just-
science to good use. Using your
Yeah,
science to the betterment. I selfishly want to change the shapes of surfboards in the 1970s. You want to change the direction of a worldwide pandemic.
Okay, I'll make it a little
convicted.
bit less grandiose and say that's partly because I want to see how if the MCU would have turned out any better if it hadn't been derailed.
It did get derailed. Oh man.
Yeah. So.
That's so good.
Oh, that's so good. Guys, I don't know. There's sometimes when I think I'm worried about because of the grandfather paradox affecting too much about time, and so I wonder, do I go and look at hang out in the very back row as Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount? Do I go and watch the pyramids being constructed? Do I hang out and just see what Michelangelo's process is like painting the Sistine Chapel? I don't know. Then there's sometimes I think I just want to go someplace and look at just almost any scene anywhere around the world before we messed with it.
There you go. Yeah.
And just look at that created goodness and go, that's awesome. Sometimes it's just that for me.
Yeah. What would an untouched south end of Wrightsville Beach look like before housing and beach condos? Yeah, that's good. Man, so fun. All right, y'all. One last thing. Recommendations. If you're going to do some time related fandom, what would you recommend to the folks out there? It could be something we talked about here, or just something off the top of your head in terms of like you recommend a time-related fandom or a book about quantum physics. What would you throw out to the folks? I'll give a quick. I'll share. I really love Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. I think it's a game changer in terms of thinking about the butterfly effect and what that means and all that thing. It's a short story. It's only a handful of pages, and it deals even with like some politics of how things would change in world history just by small actions. And then I'll recommend Catholic theologian and scientist Ilia Dilia. She is fantastic, and if you want to dive anything to the integration of faith and science and how they can have a really rich, in-depth, healthy conversation with another, check out her works. I'm reading The Not Yet God by her at the moment. I'm having to read every other page over again to wrap my head around it, but she is one of my big heroes right now. I was able to meet her at Theology Beer Camp last year in Denver, and she's a powerhouse when it comes to faith and science. So Ilia Dilia, read her. You guys, you're up. What's up?
I'm going to go Doctor Who every time. It's such a fun time-related fandom. I will say, as a something that is not necessarily moving back and forth in time, but the show For All Mankind. I love the premise of if something in time that we know shifts. Again, this kind of goes into the grandfather paradox kind of thing. How does that then reshape decades worth of activity across the globe? That's a really fun show that demonstrates what might be changed.
Man, fantastic. Andy, how about you, buddy?
Yeah. So Sean Carroll on his podcast Mindscape just had an episode 300 and did a nice long monologue on does time exist, which is very similar to the question, is time real? So if you want to hear a lot more than 3 or 4 minutes from an actual physicist even on relativity and quantum physics and how time intersects with all those things, I would definitely recommend checking that out. If you like reading rather than listening on heady topics like that, one of the classics is Kip Thorne's book, Black Holes and Time Warps. It was kind of the first popular book about these general relativity solutions that allow for time travel. That book was influential on the movie Interstellar. Kip Thorne was the science advisor on Interstellar, and that book played a big part in its emergence. It also gets an on-camera appearance in one of the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. That's one of the books that Peter Parker is checking out as a science nerd. And in terms of fiction, I've talked about a lot of different things on here, but today I'll shout out Legends of Tomorrow, a time travel show.
Nice.
It kind of went a lot of different places, had some different kind of takes. And for my money, it's season 3 that really gets going and gets a lot more fun with the time travel premise. But there's a lot of fun to check out there. Especially there's a time loop episode, a Groundhog Day style time loop episode that's a lot of fun. Not least because it is aware of things like Groundhog Day, or the characters are aware of things like Groundhog Day, and so that factors into how they experience a time loop.
Nice. Yeah, I missed those CW comic book shows. Those were good times, and the before times. Not too bad. Not too shabby. Thanks, everybody.
Superman and Lois is still a thing.
I guess it is. Yeah. Friends, thank you so much. We're just touching the surface. Andy, you said that podcast was Mindscape is the name of the podcast?
Yeah, hosted by Sean Carroll. And episode 300 a couple weeks ago was the time one. I
will check that out. Man, I need another podcast. Like I need another book on my shelf. But hey, I'll consume it all. And I don't know if you hear this, folks. Listen carefully. Oh, yep. There's the sound of thunder, folks. Thanks for being here. When you go outside, do not step on a butterfly. It could change the timeline that you are on. We love you guys. Remember, wherever you find yourself on the time stream, the sacred time stream, you are loved, you are cared for, and if you ever need anything, all of us are there for you to reach out, to be with you, to pray for you, to support you in solidarity, because, hey, we're all traveling on this timeline together, and we can't do it alone. You are loved. Peace, friends.